Hi, this video is looking at examiner feedback and advice for the short story. So this is a selection of material from an EDUQAS training day given to lecturers and the examining reports. So the short story is worth 40 marks. 24 or 60% is how interesting the story is, including word count, and SPAG is 16, so 40% is spelling, punctuation and grammar, 40%. So content, so the advice given is keep the short story straightforward, realistic and believable, write in the first person in the past tense, stick to no more than 2 or 3 characters, go straight into the action, clear development of ideas and plot, and have a real ending. Something must be different, so something must have changed for your character from the start to beginning. Write the title from the exam paper at the top, ensure you incorporate the ideas into the plot in some way. It doesn't have to be in a huge way, but in some way. Okay, focus on the character and having a strong sense of narrative voice. A good way of doing this is using asides or speaking to the reader. And descriptions, sentences, figurative language and all that kind of stuff. Do it, but little. You don't need huge things. So you don't need 10 similes. It's not a checklist. You don't have to do every single one. So the examiner says that the most candidates write better when they write from personal experience. Higher grades are the sense of authenticity. Weaker work was implausible and not believable. So in summary, always go for an entertaining but believable story. Some thought and planning definitely helps candidates. So this could be as simple as doing a beginning, middle and end at your top of your page. Do it on your answer page so the examiner can see it. So word count. So the examiner says candidate needs to think about their writing and make sure that it has some substance and detail. The target is 450 words. So the word count is 100 over that, but I would say if you get to 450, that is absolutely fine. The examiner says that weaker responses were often too brief or lack specific detail. So I would say anything less than 2 pages, or if you're doing it on the computer, anything less than 400 words is not going to get you any sort of mark really. So again, the examiner goes on to say that weaker work is often too brief and thin to develop convincingly, and often they provide limited evidence to which to base a fair assessment. So this is for content and SPAG. What they're saying is, if you don't give the examiner enough to mark, they can't really give you a high mark for anything. So again, a page or a page and a quarter is too short. It needs to be at least 2 pages. If it is too short, examiner will put this sort of thing: thin, brief, limited. All of those mean it's too short. However, there's nothing to be gained from writing endlessly and aimlessly. So some people that come out of the exam will say to me, "Oh, I've written 6 pages." We don't particularly want that either. I would say between 2 to 3.5 pages, 3.5 pages maximum. So something like this in 45 to 55 minutes would be something a bit more than that perhaps, but that is what you should be looking to do. 40% of the total available marks for writing off a SPAG, and the examiner says too many students lose marks because of the lack of accuracy in their work. The main things that are going to stop you getting a 4 or 5 is accuracy, recurring issues including spelling, punctuation, also capital letters. Control of tensing is an issue for grade 2 or 3 students, and time given at the end of the exam for proofreading is time well spent. So this is the common errors you need to do to stop yourself getting a grade 4. You need to do this to get above a grade 4 or 5. And again, tenses are a main issue for students. So the examiner says candidates need to be consistent with tenses. Simple past tense is usually the safest. So you can do present tense, but you've just got to make sure it all stays in there. Time given at the end of the exam for proofreading is time well spent. So again, these are the common mistakes, but even people who are going for grade 8, grade 9, you need to go through. Maybe your mistakes would be a bit more complicated, a bit more complex, but I guarantee you'll pick 2 or 3 mistakes at least if you look over 2 or 3 pages, and just make sure your handwriting is readable as well. So quick summary then: successful responses are realistic stories, well judged in length and neither too brief or too long. You've got technical accuracy, areas for improvement, the tenses, basic errors often numerous. Candidates need to have time to proofread their own. And from a content point of view, remember, realistic story of beginning, middle and a plausible ending.